Estamos grabando la clase del 25 del 8 del grupo. ¿Qué grupo es este? Este es el grupo 3. Grupo 3. 25 del 8 del grupo 3. The noun phrase. So today we're going to begin with this. This is the very first unit of the second course. And what we have to do is trying to go deep into this in a deeper manner than the previous term. Okay, so the very first stuff we're going to say is reading this. It says, the tall girl standing in the corner who became angry because you knocked over her glass after you waved to her when you entered is Mary Smith. And that's a very good example for the fact that noun phrases can be really, really long. Okay, what does it mean? It means that noun phrases can be or can contain several different constituents inside of them. Okay, let's remember the idea of what a constituent is. A constituent is a building block. That is to say, it is something that we're going to use so as to create something bigger. In this respect, phrases, they contain heads and modifiers. Therefore, a phrase constituent can be a head or a modifier. In this case, noun phrases can have very complex constituents. In this example, we can see that the noun phrase begins in the determiner the and it ends with the verb entered, right? What happens then is that this noun phrase contains clauses as post modifiers, but not just one clause, but several clauses. At least I can tell you quite easily there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different clauses. Okay, so therefore, grammarians have stated that noun phrases are indefinitely complex. Okay, noun phrases. Well, phrases, as the third element within the grammatical hierarchy, then they are composed of lexemes, right? Now, I would say those are the forms, that is to say nouns or adjectives or whatever, but they have function. Function means the way in which they behave inside of the phrases. That is to say, inside of a phrase, there is a function called head, and which is the most important, central, obligatory, relevant element inside of any phrase. In the case of a noun phrase, the head is a noun, right? Then we have a definition for that. A head around which, for the most part, the other constituent cluster and which indicates concord with other parts of the sentence, right? So inside of noun phrases, what we have is a head, which is a noun, right? And that noun will create concord. Concord means that the presence of one element will influence on the form of another element, right? So let's take, for example, the first example, right? The tall girl standing in the corner is my sister. In that case, we can see that the sentence created by one clause, which is created by at least 1, 2, 3, 4 different phrases, right? Well, 3 phrases, in fact. Then the concord made by the noun girl is represented or can be perceived or can be, can be traced to the determiner, right? The, and to the verb phrase because of its form, right? I'm going to use a word for that. So just give me a second. Okay. That stuff, good, and draw, and that's it. Okay. So the girl standing in the corner, right? So the girl.
Profe, ¿qué era Concord? Perdón.
Concordancia. Concord means that the form of that there's an item which will influence on the form of some other items. In this case, as in the example, is uh, John, whatever. It's a very bad example. We can see that the presence of this noun phrase, this verb phrase, and this another noun phrase, right? Well, in a very simple analysis, we can see this pre-modifier, and this is the verb head, right? Therefore, this is the noun phrase subject, and this is the verb phrase verb, right? Let's forget about John. Girl then is a noun and it's the head, right? But this noun, girl, has some characteristics in it. The very first of them is the fact that girl is a proper noun. We know. I mean, it's a common noun. Sorry, it's a common noun. We know that, but it's also singular. That is to say, it has number. Nouns have number. That is to say, they can be singular or plural, right? Now, the fact is that, or the issue is that the form girl will influence on the selection of one specific determiner, the, right? Therefore, the determiner will also have number. In this case, singular. And as you can see, there is a concord between the singular noun head with the singular determiner, right? On the very same hand, the same happens with between the noun head and the verb. And as you can see, the verb is also in its singular form, right? Therefore, nouns, they have concord. You can clearly see this in Spanish. In Spanish, it's sort of different because we have more possibilities for concord. Let's take, for example, the fact that in Spanish you have gender number, right? So, for example, if I say manzana, the article I need is la. But why? Well, because there's concord between the noun head and the determiner. The concord has to do with number one, number, because the noun is singular, and second, with gender, because manzana is feminine, right? Therefore, we need a singular feminine determiner. Um, in this case, then it's very important to notice or to realize that in a contrast between English and Spanish, within the Spanish language, then we have more instances of concord than in English because of the nature of the language, right? Let's remember that in English, you don't adjectives, for example, they don't make any difference between number or between gender, right? You just say big, right? A big house, a big girl, a big boy, a big dog, right? But or beautiful, beautiful house, beautiful girl, beautiful dog. But in Spanish, it doesn't. It is not the same. Uh, bonito, niño, bonita, niño bonito, niña bonita, perro bonito, right? So you make this difference. That's it. Concord. The idea of concord. Again, concord means that one item influences on the form of another items inside of the very same unit. And within units as well, right? As we can see between the noun head and the verb head. Concord. There are names for that? Yes, there are names for that. Subject verb concord, for example. Subject verb concord. There must be a concord between that in terms of number, for example. Head, around which, for the most part, the other constituent cluster and which indicates concord with other parts of the sentence. Okay, cluster, the idea of cluster. Let's take another example. Vamos que se puede. Eso, computador. Thank you. Okay, let's go with another example. The idea of cluster. We will say then the following. Uh, okay, here we have a phrase, the very beautiful house. We know this is a phrase, but how do we know that? Well, basically because most of its items must cluster around the head. That is to say, they must work around the head. We did this last term. Which is the most important word inside of this entire phrase? Then obviously is house, right? But then there is a problem with the word very. The problem is, deals with the fact that very is not or does not cluster with the noun head house, right? But it clusters with the adjective beautiful, right? In simpler terms, we can see that I can say beautiful house or the house, but I can't say very house, right? Therefore, there is a symptom or there is a hint that perhaps very is not sharing or it is not a constituent of the noun phrase, the very beautiful house, but it is the constituent of another phrase, right? Which is this one, very beautiful. In this respect, then the unit very beautiful, which is an adjective phrase, clusters with the noun head house, right? But inside of that adjective phrase, very clusters with the adjective head beautiful. In this form, adverb premodifier. And this another one is a determiner, right? This entire thing then is a noun phrase. That effect, the the effect that allows for a phrase to be inside of another one is called embedding. Valentina?
Profe, me perdí. Cuando hice ¿cómo se llaman los paréntesis en el very beautiful? Me perdí.
Lo que estamos hablando, Valentina, es muy sencillo. Estamos diciendo que dentro de una frase hay constituyentes. Los constituyentes son los ítems que pertenecen a aquella frase. Esos constituyentes pueden ser de varios tipos. Pueden ser heads, cabezas, núcleos, les dicen en español, y modificadores, modifiers, ¿ya? ¿Cómo sabemos cuándo o qué constituyentes trabajan con cuál o con qué otro núcleo o head? Lo hacemos porque entregan su significado a él. Entonces, el ejemplo de Very Beautiful House, tenemos que house es la palabra más importante. ¿Cómo sabemos eso? Porque el resto trabaja en torno a ella. ¿Sí? El problema es que no todas las palabras trabajan en torno a house, o sea que el cluster no está hecho dirigido hacia house en la totalidad de las palabras de esa frase. ¿Cómo probamos eso? Tomamos cada uno de los ítems y lo hacemos trabajar junto al head. Por ejemplo, the house funciona, beautiful house funciona, very house no funciona. ¿Qué dice eso? Que very entonces no está al mismo nivel, que no es parte de los constituyentes de la frase, sino que está en otro lugar, trabajando de otra forma. Nos damos cuenta entonces que very entrega su significado o modifica al adjetivo beautiful. Very beautiful, ahí sí funciona. Y que la unidad, very beautiful, is the constituent then, or it works as a constituent for the noun phrase, the very beautiful house. Eso. ¿Es clear?
Ahora entendí. Sí.
¿Sí? Ya. El acto de encontrar una frase dentro de otra, or the fact that you can even find a clause inside of a phrase is called embedding, right? That's the concept of embedding. Therefore, we can say that in this specific example, there is an adjective phrase embedded inside of a noun phrase. Okay? Okay, hit around which for the most part, okay, we know that for the most part. How do I know that? Well, because I can find, as in the previous example, that some items will not work towards the head, but towards another element inside of the very same phrase. Like, for example, very beautiful, house, right? So, very is one item which does not work to house, but to beautiful. Head around which, for the most part, the other items cluster, that is to say, they join, and which indicates concord with other parts of the sentence. That's the head, right? For example, the tall girl standing in the corner is my sister. Then, in that example, the tall girl standing in the corner is a noun phrase, which or where the noun head is girl, with and the concord is between the determiner, the and girl, because both of them are singular, and between the noun head girl and the verb head is, because both of them are singular and they represent the third person. How do I know what's the third person? The third person is or are, in fact, pronouns he, she, it, right? In the second example, we have the very same idea, but with plural forms, where the noun head girls, that is to say, girl plus a Z1, um, creates a concord between the noun head and the verb head. The verb head is plural as well as the noun head. And that's it. Noun phrase constituents, the determinative. Okay, here we have some other interesting elements. As I said before, a noun phrase can be understood as a square where um, inside of it we have the head as the central obligatory element. Before the head we have pre-modifiers, and after the head we can find pre-modifiers if they are optional or complements if they are not. But at the very beginning, at the very beginning, we can find the terminers, and this is something new. The terminers. The terminers are a group of words, not just one type of word, but a group of them. And this group of words, they provide a reference to the noun head, right? Okay, I'm gonna get this stuff very slow. Okay, I said, or we have read, that inside of phrases we can find heads and modifiers, right? Modifiers, they modify, quite obvious, the noun head, right? But how? Well, basically because they provide characteristics to the head. So adjectives, beautiful house, big house, red house, or whatever. But we can also find modify determiners, and determiners, they don't provide a characteristic. They provide the idea of definiteness. Definiteness. Puede que me equivoque en el. Oh, how do I? Mi spelling es muy malo, chiquillo. Sorry. Sí, con E. Right? Definiteness. That is to say, if there is sufficient knowledge between the speaker and the receiver for them to define, to know exactly what are we talking about. Okay, so the determinative, that's another name for determinants. Okay, um, determinants, then I'm going to find, yesterday we made this with definition that we took out of the Cambridge Online Dictionary. Dictionary. Okay, so determiners are words such as the, my, this, some, 20, each, any, which are used before nouns. Determiners include the following common types: article, demonstrative, possessive, quantifiers, numbers. Okay, so the idea of a determiner is one word which will provide at least two different meanings. The very first of them is definiteness, and the other one has to do with number. As you can see, it is not one single group of words, but several groups of them. You can have articles, both of them, definite and indefinite articles. You can have demonstrative determiners. You can have possessive determiners. You can have quantifiers and numbers. Okay. It is quite interesting to notice as well that articles, they state the difference between definite and indefinite. That is to say, when I use the definite article the, then what I'm doing is um, letting know to the receiver that both of us, we are sure about what we're talking about. So, for example, let's take this for example. Would you give me the glass? Or would you give me the glass? When I say that, I'm inferring that both of us know what glass I'm referring to, right? There are several glasses, and I want one specific one. So I will say, would you give me the glass? Because I'm asking for one of them in particular. Instead, if I'm using the indefinite article a, would you give me a glass? I'm asking for any of them, right? Because there is no definite meaning, right? So that's the basic difference. There's another difference between articles and, well, the following difference is between demonstrative determiners, which they provide um, the idea of proximity and distance. That is to say, something is quite close to me or very far away, right, from the speaker. In this respect, this proximity and distance is not just related to physical reality, but also to psychological proximity or distance and time distinctions as well. So, for example, I want this. I need this shirt, for example. I need this shirt. I really need this shirt, right? Or I really need that shirt, right? And if you, I mean, in terms of physical distance, then the selection between this and that has to do with which one is closer to the speaker. But also, it has a psychological distance because when I use this, what I'm saying is that I prefer that I'm fond of, right? Instead of there's another form that which means a psychological distance, therefore a sort of reluctancy, I would say, right? Possessives, I won't say much because they're quite obvious. And then quantifiers. Okay, numbers and quantifiers. There's a difference between numbers and quantifiers because numbers are what we actually understood. We actually understand about them, like one, two, three, four, five, like ordinal numbers and cardinal numbers, like first, second, third, fourth, so on and so forth. Meanwhile, quantifiers are words which entail the number meaning, right? Right. Well, summary. Determiners, they provide the idea of definiteness, but I would also add the idea of number. Okay, on the one hand. On the other hand, they can be, they are not one group of words, but they are several. So we, inside of determiners, we will find articles, we will find uh, demonstrative, we will find possessives, right? Possessives, we will find quantifiers with Q, right? I'm not crazy. Yes. and we will find enumerators. They call it in that manner. Numbers. They call it numbers. Okay. So determinants, they provide definiteness or number. It is not one group of words, but several. So inside of this umbrella term, we will find articles, demonstrative determinants, possessive determinants, quantifiers, and numbers. Okay. Apart from that, determinants can be subdivided into at least three groups: predeterminants, predeterminants, central determinants, and post determinants. And post determinants. Predeterminants, that is to say, all items that can precede any central determiner, including zero article in a noun phrase. For example, all, both, double. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna make it easier. What you need to know is this: a central determiner is an article, right? So a central determiner is an article. Any determiner that we can find before an article then is a predeterminer. The article would be the central determiner, and any other determiner that we can find after the central determiner is called post determiner. Let's take some examples. I'm gonna make it okay. So this is an example. Double the time. Double the time is a noun phrase, right? Double the time is a noun phrase. Time is the noun here. And then I have double and be. So what are they? Right? Both of them are determiners, right? So some grammarians, like Biver, for example, they state that the existence of a thing called determiner phrase. Determiner phrase, which is the union of all the determiners you can find inside of a noun phrase, right? So in this case, following Biver's analysis, this thing should be analyzed as a determiner phrase acting as a premodifier. And inside of this determiner phrase, we have two different constituents. The first of them is double, which is a predeterminer, and D, which is a central determiner. Right? Right. Why? Because by theory, we say that inside of a noun phrase, there is only one possible slot for determiners, and they are always at the very beginning of the noun phrase. Example, a big house, big a house. So the very first noun phrase then is sort of correct. I don't like that term, but I would say appropriate, because in front of the head, we have this premodifier, is an adjective premodifier, right? And at the very beginning, you have the determiner premodifier. But the second phrase is not appropriate, is inappropriate, I would say, because there is a mixture. I mean, they changed positions between they exchange positions between the determiner and the modifier. Is it clear so far? See? See?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, good. Now, the problem with determiners is this. Are determiners premodifiers or not? So can I say determiner premodifier or not? Well, there are at least two different versions of it. The first version is the version that comes from from Quirk's school of thought, where every single item which is inside of a phrase, which is not the head, then works towards the head. Therefore, the determiner, even though it doesn't make any change in the head's meaning, it is still considered to be a modifier. I'm going to explain that. If I say dog, and then I'm going to try to add some meaning to that. So I'm going to say brave dog, right? We can clearly see how brave is performing the role of modifier of the head, right? Because it's providing a characteristic. It is not any dog. It is like this. But if I add the indefinite article a, a, then a, even though it's working towards the head, it is not providing further meaning. It is just saying that the speaker and the receiver, they don't have enough information about the entity, right? So I'm still wondering whether determiners are premodifiers or not. All over again. Okay, these are articles, right? Let's do it with numbers. If I say 3 houses, the determiner 3, which is a number, an enumerator, the number 3 is not providing any characteristic, but just saying how many, right? Therefore, it does not fit in the modifier definition, like 100%. What are we going to do? Well, what we're going to do is this. We're going to put determiner premodifier no matter what. But it is very important that you understand that determiners, they don't work in the very same way as modifiers, right? That is why they have been separated from them, and they are just given one single slot inside of the noun phrase, and always at the very beginning, right? I don't know if it is clear enough. Is it clear?
Yes, they
Okay.
don't modify as much as other modifiers, as
Okay.
you have been saying.
Okay, good. That's the idea, right? That's the idea. So they just provide number or definiteness. Okay. 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 Let's go with the idea of definiteness. The main semantic contribution of the determiner is to mark the noun phrase as definite or indefinite. Yeah, there are definite noun phrases and indefinite noun phrases. The, that is to say, the definite article the, is known as the definite article, and a as the indefinite article, since these are the most basic and elementary markers of definite and indefinite noun phrases. But all noun phrases can be classified as definite or indefinite, right? The definite article. What is meant by definite here can best be understood by looking at some examples containing the definite article. In the following, the definite noun phrase is enclosed in brackets. The part following the is the head. So, the president of France has appointed a new prime minister. And where did you put the key? The indicates that the head of the noun phrase is considered sufficient in the context to identify the referent. That is to say, only one person can be president of France at a given time, right? So using the description in number 1 uniquely identifies a person, and that's why it's definite, because there is enough context, right? In the second, where did you put the key? Although any number of keys might exist, the second form will be used only in a context that makes clear which one I'm talking about. That is, for example, the key to the car you just told me to unload, right? So all over again. The definiteness provided by determiners then is the product of the context. That is to say, we use the definite articles when, or we can say this is a definite noun phrase when there is enough context for both speaker and receiver in order to identify the referent. When I say the referent, I'm saying the noun head, okay? Indefinite article obviously is the other way around. The indefinite article doesn't indicate that the description in the head is defining. That is to say, you can't be sure. The description is not presented as unique in the context. Take these examples. Number one, a cabinet minister has been arrested, but I don't know which one, right? I'll give you a key, but I don't know which one. In the very first example, then, a cabinet contains a number of ministers, and if I don't know or I'm not bothering to say which one of them got arrested, I would use A rather than B, right? Here, of course, a which question is perfectly appropriate, like which one would be a natural response to number one. And because the context for the second one is likely to be one where it is clear which lock you'll be using the key in, but it will be a lock for which there are multiple keys. And if I haven't decided or don't care which of them I'll give you, I will again use the indefinite article, right? So I think it is self-explanatory. Definiteness, I can retrieve the entity, the referent that we're talking about, and indefinite if I can't or I don't care, whatever. Which determiners are definite and indefinite? The words that mark the noun phrase as definite or as indefinite when they serve as determiners are given in 20 whatever, right? So definite, you can say, oh, there's enough context. Those are the words. Those are the examples. The, this, that, all, both, the relative pronouns, which, whichever, what, whatever. And indefinite, that is to say, there's not enough context. A, each, every, some, any, either, neither, nor, another, a few, a little, right? You can read them. Interesting points. Take a look at this. A few, a little, right? Even though they are multi-word units, they are considered to be just one single determiner. What it means is that you can have multi-word units as determiners. Again, take a closer look to the second part where it says interrogative, right? So it says indefinite, a, whatever, something, sufficient, interrogative, which, whichever, what, whatever. So those WH words, which, whichever, what, in a question, they are determiners, okay? Okay. Noun phrase constituents. Predeterminers. Here you have a huge list of predeterminers. All, both, half, all the girls, both those cars, half an hour, half an hour. Let's take a look at a couple of them. Half an hour. How would you analyze half an hour? Wait, half an hour, I would analyze it like this. Half an hour. This is a noun phrase, right? Where hour is the noun head and half an is a determiner phrase acting as a premodifier. And inside of that, we have half, which is a predeterminer, and an, which is my central determiner. And that's it. Again, let's remember that articles are central determiners, and every single thing, in most cases, every single thing that you can find in front of them, they are predeterminers, and every single determiner you can find after them, they are post-determiners. Okay. All both have. The multipliers double, twice, three times. Take a look into that. Three times. Three times the sum. Three times. Three times is a multi-word unit. Three times. The fractions, 1/3, 1/5. Okay, let's go back to the previous term. 1/3, 1/5 is not a multi-word unit. It's just one unit. Why? Well, because there's a hyphen. That's the orthographic definition for a word, right? So no problem with that. Such and what, the same idea. Noun phrases, central determiners, and there you have all the central determiners you need. Definite, indefinite, indefinite, whatever, right? Right. ¿Alguna duda, alguna consulta, algo que se deba decir?
Todo claro hasta el momento, por lo menos para mí.
Ya, lo único que hemos hablado hoy día ha sido de determiners, el primer elemento adentro de una noun phrase. Los determiners no es un grupo de palabras, es un término paraguas, umbrella term, ¿sí? Y los determiners son artículos, demonstrative, possessive, quantifiers, numbers. Y los determiners se dividen en tres. Pre, central, post. ¿Cómo los diferencio? Por el central. ¿Cuáles son los central? Los artículos. Todo determiner que esté adelante de un central, predeterminer. Todo el que esté después, post-determiners. Otro punto. Determiner phrase es la unión de todos los determiners porque aparecen todos juntos, pegaditos, adelante de la noun phrase, así que los encierro a todos en paréntesis y coloco abajo determiner phrase. ¿Cómo lo analizo? Pre, central, post, según como aparezcan. Último punto, los determiners pueden ser también multi-word units. Cuidado con eso. Es todo lo que dije muy bien. Dudas.
Here, is that how far we get in the analysis of determiner phrases? Like central,
Central
predeterminer?
post.
Okay,
That's it.
okay.
It is only
Okay, thank you.
pre-central post. Okay?
So
Okay.
that's how it would appear in an
Yes.
analysis phrase. Okay. Thank you.
Any other question, guys? Girls, sorry. No? No. Ok. Ya. Este semestre entonces le vamos a hacer caso a la gente y vamos a dejar de hacer esas maratones de gramática